Welcome to Chapter 3. This is another doozy. And before we begin, of course, as is our tradition, I will read 35:23 verse 1. Yea, a commandment I give unto you, that ye search these things diligently, for great are the words of Isaiah. In this chapter, the last days will see covenant curses proceed secondary to the corruption and apostasy of the Lord's people. Conditions will degrade from drought and economic hardship to internal chaos and anarchy until, in the end, the Antichrist invades militarily. Verse 1 reads, Even now the Lord, Jehovah of hosts, deprives Judea and Jerusalem of both staff and crutch, all food supply and water supply. By invoking his title, Jehovah of hosts, the Lord is once again making an official decree as arbiter of the covenant. Judea and Jerusalem are monikers for his end-time covenant people, as we saw in chapter 2, while also representing the ancient covenant people who had Isaiah in their midst. This chapter will outline how covenant curses unfold then and in our day. The food and water supplies will be deprived as one of the first blessings of the covenant is lost due to apostasy. Verses 2 and 3 read, The valiant man and soldier, the magistrate and prophet, the augur and elder, the officer and dignitary, advisors, skilled craftsmen, and orators. These verses list several different types of men who will, like the food and water supplies from verse 1, dwindle away because of corruption, pleasure-seeking, and sin. Valiancy, military might, solid government officials, and security, prophets who commune with God, skilled craftsmen, and other pillars of society will disappear as corruption and idolatry infiltrate their ranks, as well as the rest of society. Immorality and idolatry decimate the wise and moral of society, leaving a power vacuum which the next verses describe. Verses 4 and 5, I, Jehovah, will make adolescents their rulers. Delinquents will lord it over them. People will oppress one another, every man his neighbor. The young will be insolent to the elderly, the vile to the honorable. Free societies' leaders reflect the moral and spiritual status of their peoples, since they tend to elect and support like-minded men and women. When society declines into hedonism, celebrity worship, and sexual depravity, spiritually depraved and immature and sinful men become their rulers. Adolescents and delinquents are terms reflecting this level of person. When food and water are scarce and good leadership is missing, people turn on each other, and the streets are ruled instead by gangs who suppress and violently assault the vulnerable who remain. Verse 5 in particular outlines the state of society. Neighbor versus neighbor, the upcoming generation will disrespect their elders and parents, and the disgustingly immoral will rail against the righteous. Are we seeing signs of these things now? Verses 6 and 7, Then will a man apprehend a kinsman of his father's house, and say, You have a tunic, be our leader, and take charge of this ruination. But he will raise his hand in that day and swear, I am no physician. There is neither food nor clothing in my house. You cannot make me a leader of the people. These verses describe a society in such chaos that it is absent of authority, law enforcement, and safety. They describe desperate people approaching a man who apparently held some prior authority or leadership position as intimated by his tunic. Perhaps he was prior law enforcement or government office or military. He refuses to lead them out of the anarchy as requested because he has no solutions, no remedy, no cure. Like a physician without medications or instruments to render aid, he has no idea how to rescue those around him. He is, after all, suffering the same illness. He has no food or clothing himself. Verses 8 and 9, Jerusalem will falter and Judea fall because their tongue and their actions are contrary to Jehovah, an affront to his glory before his very eyes. The look on their faces betrays them. They flaunt their sin like Sodom. They cannot hide it. Woe to their souls. They have brought disaster upon themselves. These verses are quite telling. Remember that the Lord refers to his covenant people as Jerusalem and Judea. Here he reveals that his people have rejected him, and this is apparent by how they both speak and act. When he says "before his very eyes," he shows that he sees all of what they are doing. They cannot hide their words or their actions. Frankly, they cannot hide their wicked state from anyone. Like those of Sodom, they wear their sin on their faces. The result? Impending destruction, as the Lord invokes covenant curses by declaring, "Woe to their souls." Disaster is coming, alluding to Jehovah's day of judgment, which we will learn later is the day the Lord releases the king of Assyria to perform a Sodom and Gomorrah-like level of destruction on the wicked of his covenant people. Thankfully, after this frightening declaration, he comforts his sheep who are the righteous wheat amongst those doomed tares with the promise in the next verse. Tell the righteous it shall be well with them. They shall eat the fruits of their own labors. Although hard times affect even the righteous, the Lord keeps his promises with those who meet their obligations to their shared covenant. Future chapters will show that the righteous who stay true to the Lord through these difficult times will be gathered to safety before major calamity strikes. The pattern is that the breakdown of society will precede the sweeping and extreme calamities of the Lord's day of judgment, and the righteous will certainly be affected by this breakdown. However, he promises to protect them by gathering together in the stronghold of Zion. A linking verse describing this is found in Isaiah 57:1, which reads, "The righteous disappear, and no man gives it a thought. The godly are gathered out, but no one perceives that from impending calamity the righteous are withdrawn." I love that the Lord took a one-verse break after spending 9 verses describing the evil his covenant people have embraced and what will soon happen because of this. He seemed to take a brief break to assure his righteous sheep that they will be safe from the calamitous judgment, but he immediately returns to the wicked in this verse. But woe to the wicked, when calamity overtakes them, they shall be paid back for the deeds they have done. In verse 12, "As for my people, babes subject them, women wield authority over them. O my people, your leaders mislead you, abolishing your traditional ways." Here the Lord refers to the covenant people, us, when he addresses "my people." He describes our leaders as spiritually immature and the opposite of manly when he calls them babes and women. He tells us that we're being misled and that the righteous traditions are gone. It's hard to accept that this is the case, even within the church, but this is repeated in several areas of Isaiah's work, including chapters 9, verses 14 through 16, which read, "Therefore Jehovah will cut off from Israel head and tail, palm top and reed, in a single day. The elders, or notables, are the head, the prophets who teach falsehoods the tail. The leaders of these people have misled them, and those who are led are confused." If the Lord is to be believed, this truth not only existed in Isaiah's day, but it exists right now. Jehovah will take a stand and contend with them. He has arisen to judge the nations. He will bring to trial the elders of his people and their rulers, and say to them, "It is you who have devoured the vineyard. You fill your houses by depriving the needy. What do you mean by oppressing my people, humbling the faces of the poor?" says Jehovah of hosts. After reassuring the righteous that they will be protected from the calamity that is coming, he continues his reassurance by announcing that he will contend with the leaders who have led them wrong, and will take a stand against them, which, according to the Hebrew source of this phrase, means that he will take the stand as in testify in court against them. In verse 14, he testifies in this trial that the elders of his people, their religious leaders, have squandered their wealth. How have they done this? He states that they, quote, "fill your houses by depriving the needy," unquote. Remember that in Isaiah, houses equals temples. So by filling their temples with fineries and expensive decor, they are depriving the poor among them of sustenance and support. Ponder on what that means in our end time situation. Interestingly, he will somehow say this to them in the future, perhaps through his servant. Verse 15, which reads, "What do you mean by oppressing my people, humbling the faces of the poor?" says Jehovah of hosts. Here he equates his people as my people, As we know, the Lord is the champion of the poor and considers them his. He will protect and provide for them during the difficulties leading up to the day of his judgment, and at that day will shield them from the fiery assault of the king of Assyria, or Antichrist. In verses 16 and 17 we read, Jehovah says, moreover, because the women of Zion are haughty and put on airs, painting their eyes, ever flirting when they walk, and clacking with their feet, my Lord will afflict the scalps of the women of Zion with baldness. Jehovah will expose their private parts. Here the Lord addresses the women of Zion, referring to the women of the covenant. They have degraded themselves, attracting men sexually with their walk and their outward appearance. Their focus is not on the Lord, but on men and their own appeal. These women have moved from one spiritual level to an abased level of lust and self-praise. In verse 17 he foretells a day when he will have removed their hair and their clothing, exposing them for what they really are, harlots. Next, the Lord condemns the women further. A list of their fineries and beautifications is given along with what that day will bring to these women. When the Lord says that day, he is referring to the time when the final judgment, which includes especially the fiery militaristic invasion of the king of Assyria, or Antichrist, descends upon the promised land, starting with the covenant people themselves. This is found in other scriptures as well. Listen to the similarities found in Doctrine and Covenants 1:12, verses 23 through 26. Verily, verily, I say unto you, darkness covers the earth, and gross darkness the minds of the people, and all flesh has become corrupt before my face. Behold, vengeance cometh speedily upon the inhabitants of the earth, a day of wrath, a day of burning, a day of desolation, of weeping, of mourning, and of lamentation. And as a whirlwind it shall come upon the face of the earth, saith the Lord. And here's the important verse. And upon my house shall it begin, and from my house shall it go forth, saith the Lord. First among those among you, saith the Lord, who have professed to know my name, and have not known me, and have blasphemed against me in the midst of my house, saith the Lord. Here's how the Lord puts it in Isaiah, directed at the women. In that day my Lord will strip away their finery, their anklets, head ornaments, and crescents, the pendants, chains, and scarves, tiaras, bracelets, and ribbons, zodiac signs, and charm amulets, the rings, the noselets, the elegant dress, the shawl, the kerchief, and the purse, hosiery, sheer linen, millinery, and cloaks. And instead of perfume there shall be a stench, instead of the girdle a piece of twine, instead of coiffure, baldness, instead of festive dress, a loincloth of burlap, for in place of beauty there shall be ignominy. One of the results of covenant curses is the reversal of circumstances of the prideful and the humble. Those who exalted themselves and refused to help those in need are humbled, their wealth removed, and their security compromised. Those who were humble, destitute, and vulnerable will be rescued, shielded, and provided for by the Lord. This chapter began with how the Lord will start the process of executing covenant curses for violators. Prosperity and sustenance evaporate. Food and water become scarce. Good leaders who are supposed to provide security and to sustain the law are replaced with spiritually immature individuals who seek their own wealth and immoral instincts rather than what they're supposed to provide the people they swore to protect and provide for. Religious leaders are more interested in wealth and adorning their houses, otherwise known as temples, with riches than they are with providing for the poor and the vulnerable. Women debase themselves, spending their time and money attracting men and adorning themselves with expensive clothing and jewelry, rather than concerning themselves with the needs of others and high-level spiritual activities. Because of this ill society, they spiral into lawlessness and chaos. Neighbors fight against neighbors, the young prey on the old and the weak, society slips into anarchy and crumbles from within. In these final two verses, the Lord describes the next and final step. Your men shall be felled by the sword, your mighty overthrown in war. Her gateway shall lie bereaved and forlorn. She shall sit on the ground destitute. Military destruction kills the men through enemy invasion. Their cities become broken and destroyed. Those who remain will mourn and sit on the ground without recourse. This chapter is ominous and should serve as a wake-up call for us, the Lord's covenant people. Of course, not all of us act like the covenant breakers described in the first 3 chapters of Isaiah, but none of us are completely innocent either. A careful reading of these chapters makes it clear we are guilty of idolatry, worshippers of our own creations, flaunters of our wealth, withholders of aid for the poor, being led by men who are more concerned for the expensive adornment of our temples than for the caring of the poor, being led by men who teach us untrue things regarding Jehovah. These things aren't my opinion. They're recorded as written. Go ahead and read them for yourself. Remember while you do so that the Lord very carefully arranged that we would receive his commandment to search them because their worth to us would be great, and everything that Isaiah described not only happened in his day, but applies to our day as well. He went even further in the Doctrine and Covenants to warn us that the calamitous judgment would begin with us, his covenant people, because we profess to know him when we actually do not.